In the early hours of Tuesday, August 1st, Cedar Point officially unveiled the reimagining of Top Thrill Dragster, Top Thrill 2. Top Thrill 2 is pretty much what a lot of us expected the ride to be at this point. The powerful but finicky hydraulic launch is being replaced by linear synchronous motors, or LSMs. The 420-foot tall top hat is remaining as is, but a massive vertical spike that also stands at 420 feet tall is being introduced. And the ride will feature a swing launch where an initial forward launch accelerates trains to 74 miles per hour. That leads to a rollback on the top hat, followed by a 101 mile per hour backward launch that sends trains up the new 420-foot tall vertical spike. This leads into the 120 mile per hour forward launch that sends trains up and over the top hat. Initially, I was disappointed by the ride's new name, Top Thrill 2, as I was expecting Cedar Point to give the ride a brand new and original name, and not a rehash of Top Thrill Dragster. But since this morning, the name has grown on me, and I get it. For a large part, the general theme around the ride is the same, pretty much a fast racing car, but the ride is no longer necessarily themed to a top fuel dragster, hence why dragster is no longer in the name. And Cedar Point seems to be embracing the ride's original identity, which I also stand with. It's similar to when X at Six Flags Magic Mountain was turned into X2, whereas when Mean Streak was converted to Steel Vengeance, the name was completely changed, as Vengeance is a complete departure from Mean Streak, while Top Thrill 2 is meant to embrace its original identity. Plus, the park seems to be upgrading the ride's overall theming and presence on the midway, which I'm very excited for. To be honest, I think one of the biggest shocks to me personally, other than the fact that Zamperla is the ride's manufacturer, is that the ride's queue will still be located in the coaster's infield, just like on Top Thrill Dragster. If you're familiar with the history of Dragster, I'm sure you know that in 2021, a woman waiting in line for the coaster was unfortunately struck in the head by a metal flag plate that fell from one of the ride's trains. And since then, many enthusiasts, including myself, figured the park would relocate the ride's queue to a new location. But it appears the park will instead leave the queue where it originally was with a new configuration, along with a large new shade structure for better protection from both the sun and ride itself. I'm sure a protective fence along the edges of the shade structure will also aid in protection for riders waiting in line. But this does mean when waiting in line, your view of the ride's top hat and vertical spike is basically non-existent. The ride station structure will also be reused, with a small chunk of it removed to make room for the transition into the 420-foot tall vertical spike. When facing the top hat, the station track is shifted to the left, potentially making the station platform itself narrower than it was in the past, but hopefully this is no problem. It appears that the ride control booth is located above the station track, and unloading and loading of riders may take place in just one station instead of in different locations like on Top Thrill Dragster. It also appears that riders will still board the coaster in the same location and exit on the opposite platform, with this tunnel most likely being the exit path. There's also a cool bridge over the launch track, but I'm guessing this will only be accessible for park employees. The ride will operate with 3 trains, which is half of what Top Thrill Dragster was intended to operate with, but I don't think we'll be seeing a significant reduction in overall capacity. Each train will now hold 20 riders instead of 18, and the ride will utilize Zamperla's new fast switch, which will allow the track switch to quickly swap from accepting new trains to connecting the launch track to the new vertical spike. There also appears to be a staging position before the track switch, meaning a train can be dispatched from the station into the staging position even if the train ahead is still executing the launch cycle. Based on the park's animation, trains will start the launch from a dead stop. From when the train begins its first launch to when it eventually crests over the top hat, that is exactly 45 seconds. At this point, the track switch could swap to accept the next train. If the next train is already in the staging block, and depending on how fast the drive tires are able to push trains into the launch block, the ride could still be able to launch a train around every 1 minute. Top Thrill Dragster was capable of launching 60 trains an hour at a rate of 1 train every 60 seconds. This led to a theoretical capacity of 1,080 riders per hour with the ride's 18 passenger trains. But with the ride's new 20 passenger trains, only 54 trains need to launch an hour at a rate of 1 train every 66 to 67 seconds to achieve the same capacity of 1,080 riders per hour. And since the ride should be more reliable with its new LSM launch, a reduction in overall capacity shouldn't actually be too much of a problem. While Top Thrill Dragster was capable of launching 60 trains an hour, the amount of downtime it suffered meant that less riders overall were able to ride. So even if Top Thrill 2 only operates at an average of 800 riders per hour, where 40 trains an hour are dispatched at a rate of 1 train every 90 seconds, the ride will probably still yield a much higher annual ridership number than Top Thrill Dragster ever did. However, Cedar Point hasn't specified what Top Thrill 2's theoretical capacity is, so time will tell us to what the actual capacity for the ride will be. The critical factors in the ride's capacity will be how long it takes each train to complete the launch cycle, how quickly the track switch resets afterwards, and the speed that the next train is pushed into the launch track. With the way the ride is set up, one train can still be in the final brake run while another starts the swing launch cycle. As long as the train on the brake run clears the brake block before the train on the launch goes for the 120 mph launch, it will continue up and over the top hat. Otherwise, the last launch would be aborted and the train would stop instead. Theoretically, of course. This will depend on how aggressive the ride is programmed. As I mentioned earlier, based off the animation, it takes 45 seconds from when the first launch begins to when the train crests over the top hat, which is when the track switch would reset to accept the next train. Based off Zamperlo's video of their fast switch, it takes roughly 3 seconds for the switch to swap positions. 45 plus 3 seconds is 48 seconds, and at this point, the next train could roll in from the pre-launch staging position. Based off Soaring Dragon, another triple launch coaster built by Intamin, it takes 22 seconds from when the train dispatches to when it begins its first launch. Like Top Thrill 2, Soaring with Dragon also has a track switch as part of the launch track. So 45 seconds for the launch cycle plus 3 seconds for the fast switch, plus 22 seconds for the next train to roll into the launch track and begin the next launch cycle yields roughly 70 seconds between each launch, yielding over 51 trains dispatched each hour and a theoretical capacity of 1,020 riders, which if you ask me is perfectly fine as the ride should still be more reliable than it was in the past, meaning it will yield more overall riders anyway. But another caveat in the ride's capacity will be if Cedar Point chooses to equip Top Thrill 2's lightning trains with seatbelts, as seatbelts slow the unloading and loading of coaster trains. Cedar Fair typically adds seatbelts to their coasters to lower their insurance costs, so we'll see. But the chain did recently surprise us with the moving station on Cedar Point's new Wild Mouse, which the chain has been against, and the brand new Zambezi Zinger at Worlds of Fun doesn't feature seatbelts. So who really knows, but time will tell. Overall, my main point is that capacity shouldn't really be too big of a concern. I'd say the most disappointing aspect about all of this is the removal of the ride's breathtaking launch acceleration. The hydraulic launch on Top Thrill Dragster packed a punch, as it accelerated trains from 0 to 120 mph in 3.8 seconds. While the new LSM launch on Top Thrill 2 should be far more reliable, based off the animation, it takes 7 seconds for the initial launch from 0 to 74 mph. That's a drop from a launch acceleration of 1.44 Gs to just 0.48 Gs. Of course, this is based off the animation, so we should reserve judgment until the ride is actually built, but it is interesting that no stats were shared regarding the ride's acceleration. The ride's initial rollback is also not very far up the top hat, relative to the overall 420 foot tall height that is, so I'd expect this maneuver to lack much intensity, being the train will probably remain in the pull-up. The train probably also won't travel to the top of the 420 foot tall vertical spike either, as evident in the animation, but whatever height the train does achieve, I'm sure it will be breathtaking, especially since riders will be facing the ground. Then the experience of traveling up and over the top hat will probably be largely the same, but the seats appear to sit higher off the track than the original Intamin trains did, so the 270-degree roll may be more intense this time around. Plus, the ride will now have a much longer duration time. So is Top Thrill 2 the right ride for Cedar Point? I would say absolutely. It's a great way to pay tribute to Top Thrill Dragster while also taking the original experience and making it both longer, but also much more reliable. I'm sure some of you are disappointed that the launch track doesn't feature an airtime hill, but what this will allow for is a greater focus on the sensation of speed, which is definitely what Top Thrill 2 aims to focus on. I will dearly miss the exhilarating acceleration provided by the hydraulic launch, as that was my favorite part about Top Thrill Dragster, but Top Thrill 2 should be great as well. Do I expect it to be one of the park's best coasters? Not quite, at least in my opinion, but I'm sure it will be a lot of fun for both coaster enthusiasts and the general public. The new 48-inch height requirement will open the ride up to a larger group of kids, and coaster enthusiasts will probably love the ample airtime found on the new vertical spike. Plus, the coaster's capacity shouldn't be too bad either. I'm very much looking forward to Top Thrill 2 and will definitely be lining up for it next year. coaster. I'm also hyped to see what level of excellence Amperla will deliver. The company has a desire to enter the big league of coaster manufacturers, and having another excellent coaster company will only drive the competition to build better roller coasters. Alright, that will do it for this video. Comment below what your thoughts are on Top Thrill 2, and I'll see you at the ride once it opens. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.